Hello, Blazers. Welcome to episode 130 of UAB Green and Told, original release Monday, August 12th, 2024. Through our podcast, we are given the opportunity to share stories from members of the UAB community. Listen to previous episodes of Green and Told, the campus's most downloaded podcast, at alumni.uab.edu/greenandtold on Spotify and the Apple Podcast app. While there, I'd encourage you to leave a written review to help more alums find us. I'm Greg Berry, a UAB alum and Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. You may not realize it, but microplastics can be found all around us. These tiny particles are found in our food, the air, bodies of water all over the world. Today's podcast guest, Josh Forakis, has been studying microplastics since his time taking students out of the classroom as an instructor at UAB.
We wanted to incorporate, some sort of scientific sampling of the Cahaba River. Just because it's so close to campus and it's affecting, students.
And now, as Josh will share, he's taking an even closer look at these sometimes microscopic flakes and fragments in order to understand what can be done in the future.
We designed plastics to last a really long time. And one of the unintended consequences of that is that when they break apart, they don't just, incorporate back into the environment. They can stick around as these little fragments or fibers.
And now, even as he strolls down the coastline in one of the most beautiful places imaginable, Josh finds himself coming across these particles.
If you walk on the windward beaches, you'll see these like blue-white specks in the sand, and those are the plastics, and they don't come from Oahu, they're actually coming from the ocean. And it's really crazy to get to see that.
Being able to combine research and the classroom brought Josh Forakis to UAB as a doctoral student. While his current research allows him to take in the beauty of Hawaii on a daily basis, he's always liked getting outdoors while embracing environmental interests. Born in Vermont, the son of youth pastors, moved to small-town Tennessee around the time he was starting kindergarten, a time in which he knows exactly how to describe himself.
Energetic and nerdy at the same time. I think, throughout high school, a lot of what I was interested in was music. So I actually have been playing the guitar. My grandfather was a guitarist, and he taught me how to play the guitar when I was a kid. And so I've been playing the guitar since I was a kid. And in high school, I played music at church a lot. And I also played music in a performing arts group in my high school called Wired. And so that was just a class you could take where if you were interested in doing like performances in a band, kind of in a more traditional like rock style or like a country style, because where we came from, a lot of country music. I would say very nerdy encapsulates it. I did love my chemistry classes, which my high school chemistry ended up being my inspiration to pursue chemistry later on because I just enjoyed it so much. So I tried to get into a lot of different things, I would say.
Did you always know you wanted to be a teacher, or did that come along as you went through Lee and got a little bit older?
I didn't know I wanted to be a teacher when I was in high school. I think I couldn't really understand from the other perspective what that would be like. I was kind of just in my own world in high school. But then going through college and getting outside of that, my first experiences actually teaching were tutoring. So I tutored in a chemistry class, and I also worked as a math lab tutor. So students from any number of math classes up to Calculus 1 could come into this math lab, and we would power through some word problems. And I enjoyed that because I got to work with a lot of different people. And I know for a lot of people, certain subjects are very stressful. And I've had, a lot of good opportunities to kind of learn the ways that I can think through things. And I really enjoy explaining how I think through things. And so I think through that process, and then when I finished college, kind of not really knowing what I wanted to do and finding this opportunity to teach, kind of all snowballed from there. And really in between college and teaching that first summer, because I started teaching in Houston, Texas, we went early, and over the summer I got this several week-long intensive training to try to, it's an alternative certification program. So I was able to get certified in that time. And then I learned everything about being a good teacher. And I think that was really where it solidified, like, man, this is really cool. This is what I like doing. And since then, I've really kept a lot of those things that I learned and have really tried to incorporate them into my teaching even now.
What are the aspects that you were learning when you're doing the research that you kind of said, you know what, this is what I want to adapt, and why?
Oh, yeah. I was really connected to project-based learning when I was a high school biology teacher. So my first year, I really just kind of used the materials from the teacher before me, who was an excellent teacher. And I'm very grateful that I had such a knowledgeable and experienced mentor when I started teaching, because oftentimes your first year teaching it was still a mess for me, but it was less of a mess because I had a good mentor. So I used a lot of her materials, and then the next year after that, I took each of the units of material and I adapted them into a project where students incorporated everything kind of holistically into a product. So they made models of animal cells and plant cells. They designed their own plant based off of a randomly generated environment. And so I was trying to really kind of take these really granular single lessons and try to tie them all together for a bigger project. And in addition to that, I learned a lot about inquiry learning whenever I was in teacher training. And in science, there's a lot of opportunities for inquiry learning. And so I would say that that's kind of one of the biggest, pedagogical methods that stayed with me, because inquiry learning in science, I would say, is appropriate from K through 12 through all the way, to the end of undergraduate. There's never a wrong time to let your students actually make decisions and, try some things. I know that's scary, but,
You strike me as somebody that has good energy, especially when you're in the classroom. Is that the case? And is it infectious so that the kids kind of rub off on it?
You might have to ask the students for that. When I was at UAB, I got to teach General Chemistry 1 in the fall. So that was all first semester freshmen, coming out of high school. There were definitely some non-traditional students mixed in, but, the energy I kind of feed off the energy from the group, definitely. And there are some groups that could pick up really fast what types of things I would feed off of. Because, there's really a balance when you're a teacher from being all right, I need to keep my policies and my routines in order so that we can have a productive class. And I want us to have a rapport. I want the students to get to know me as a human being as well, because that is a huge part, I think, of the learning experience. And so, yeah, I definitely fed off the energy from some students, and they kind of would kind of feed into that. There was one group that I had two students for Halloween dress up as me, and that was flattering, and it was almost too good. But yeah, I definitely enjoy kind of the energy that comes from those the freshman group. They can be, there are challenges with teaching freshmen, but I really like their energy.
Obviously, this is a UAB podcast, and you found your way to UAB. I mean, you kind of bounced around from one side of Tennessee to the other. You went down into Texas, and then your route to UAB is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Yours began kind of with a phone call.
It was actually a cold email to Dr. Joe March, because I was looking for programs that had opportunities for chemical education research, which is just where you do education research within, a discipline department. So chemistry education research, there's also physics education research, and so on and so on. So I was interested in working in chemistry and trying to bring some of the things that I learned teaching high school, those pedagogical methods, and trying them out in an undergrad class. And so I basically looked at Dr. March's faculty profile and saw that his interests were active learning, technology in the classroom, and things like that. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. I don't really know exactly what project I would want to do, but I just emailed him and said I was very interested in graduate school and I was interested in chemistry education, and I thought his specific research interests were cool. And he responded, and I was actually already planning on going to UAB for a graduate student visit, and Dr. March actually wasn't one of the faculty that you visit with, because the graduate students typically go with a, like a lab.
Sure.
But when I went for the visit, I was like, is Dr. March around? They're like, oh yeah, he's over here. So I got to go talk to him. We sat down and he kind of went over like the different types of projects we could do. And then I actually deferred a year after that before coming to UAB.
No kidding.
It was like after my first year of teaching, before my second year of teaching. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting process to eventually get there. But that extra year really kind of helped me with like getting more teaching experience. And yeah, it just ended up working out better. And then, ended up at UAB from there.
You mentioned that you were already going to come take a visit. What was it about UAB that was drawing you in at that time? Was it because you were kind of closer to home up in Tennessee, or was it just because it had the program that you were after?
It had a program I was after. I definitely wanted to be in a chemistry program. My wife's family is also from Birmingham. They don't live in Birmingham, but they are from Birmingham. And so at the time that we moved to Birmingham, they were still living there. So proximity to family was definitely a factor. That's definitely, very helpful to have. And then, it's not too far away from Tennessee. So my parents visited Birmingham a lot while I was in graduate school there, for sure.
So talk about what you did with Dr. March after you got here, because you were kind of able to do your own thing.
Yes, that was exciting. You get a lot of opportunities to make decisions and do things the way that you want to do them. Like you said, it's not very traditional in, graduate school spaces to have 100% control over the project that you do. Usually your PI has ideas and ongoing projects that they would say, here, we want you on this, or, if your interests align. I knew what my interests were, and, we kind of looked for opportunities. So that's where the honors lab, the honors general chemistry lab came in. They oftentimes will put a graduate student in charge of the class to kind of do whatever they want with the curriculum. And so they gave me this opportunity as well. And kind of the foundational idea that eventually led into what we did was, we want students to, do something that's outside of the classroom. And specifically, we wanted to incorporate, some sort of scientific sampling of the Cahaba River. And, just because it's so close to campus and it's affecting, students, and it's just a very significant watershed for Central Alabama. It's also extremely biodiverse. There's all these reasons that the Cahaba River is such an interesting place. And I knew I wanted to do something that had environmental impact, just because of my interest. And I like getting outside. And so that's where I got connected with the Cahaba River Keeper, who introduced me to microplastics. And so then there is where microplastics kind of entered the equation. And my PhD became developing a method for screening microplastics that my students could perform in our lab. And so we actually just published the experience. We call it a CURE, which is an acronym, a course-based undergraduate research experience. But it's just a way for students who maybe don't have an opportunity with a lab to do research, especially early on in their undergraduate career. So the goal was to do this with first-year students. They were honor students, but we still saw that the experience benefited those students. And so it's kind of this year-long experience of letting students design a research experiment or a research project, asking a question, getting their project vetted through a peer review process in the class, and then actually doing the research, and then finally presenting it at the UAB Student Research Expo. So that entire process was a year-long kind of class that we did 4 times. while I was there.
You mentioned microplastics.
Yes.
For those of the listeners that may not know what you're talking about, talk a little bit about exactly what a microplastic is, especially, with the Cahaba River or even
Yeah.
what you're doing now in Hawaii.
Yeah, my lab right now is a plastic pollution lab, so they are concerned with plastics of all sizes. So we actually have a group of people that are involved with, really large plastics, which are these massive nets that will come in, from the north side of Oahu. But on the other end, you have very small plastics. So we design plastics to last a really long time. And one of the unintended consequences of that is that when they break apart, they don't just incorporate back into the environment. They can stick around as these little fragments or fibers or spheres that end up pretty much everywhere. So that's why it's been such a concern, especially in the last 15 years, because we're finding microplastics in super remote places. So like even at the top of Mount Everest, people have found microplastics. They also find microplastics in caves. And then it feels like every year there's a new compartment that we're finding microplastics in. And so it's a very fast emerging research area because we don't really have a standardized method for quantifying microplastics and knowing how many they are, or there are in some compartment. And there's a big push in, environmental research to understand how many there are and where they are so that the other people who are working to, communicate to the community about the health of their water supply and other very important things, they have the proper information. And so again, there's still a lot of questions that haven't been answered. And then the question that the Cahaba Riverkeeper had is, do we have microplastics in our water? That's a question that they came to me with, and we worked with students, and we did find microplastics. We didn't use a method that was super robust, and so now that I'm here in Hawaii, I'm working in a lab that has the three kind of big instruments when it comes to quantifying microplastics, and so I'm spending time here getting experience with those. But again, to kind of summarize the answer to your question, they're just the result of all these plastic products we use that are a part of our infrastructure, and the fact that we don't always dispose of them properly, they end up back in the environment. And so in Hawaii, we're actually, in proximity to what we call the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which, if you're unfamiliar, there is a garbage patch in all of the oceans in the world, but specifically in the Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and the United States. They say it's as large as 2 times the size of Texas, and we get microplastics that will come from the garbage patch and end up on the beaches in Oahu. So if you walk on the windward beaches, you'll see these like blue, white specks in the sand, and those are the plastics, and they don't come from Oahu, they're actually coming from the ocean. And it's really crazy to get to see that.
That's just incredible. Here you are in paradise, and these little microspecks are just showing up on the beaches of the prettiest landscapes around.
Well,
so as a researcher, what can you do? What are you looking for, and where do you want that research to kind of flow to?
That's a great question. So there's so many avenues, and there are a lot of us working here at this lab, and we are all very deeply entrenched in different avenues. So some of my colleagues are not looking at the particles, but they're looking at the chemicals that could potentially leach out of plastics. So our plastic products, they, are not always just, some compound that we link together a bunch of times and we call those polymers. But we add other chemicals to these plastics so that they perform the way we want them to perform. And some of these additives are harmful to wildlife, flora, other things that, probably shouldn't be interacting with these additives. So they are actually looking at the smaller compounds that might come out of the plastics that we are intentionally adding to those plastics to make them perform better. So that's one avenue. I'm not really involved with that. right now, one of my projects that I'm working on is involved with polyester fibers. And so, our clothes are actually, a big source of microplastics as well, because we wear synthetic fibers on our bodies. And when we wash our clothes in the wash, all the water is holding microfibers when it comes out.
Sure.
And so that's another kind of avenue to kind of look at, where are these plastics ending up? Are they harmful? But then the big question we work on, because this lab is affiliated with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is all about measurement science, we want to know accurately how many plastics there are and where they are.
With everything that you're doing, where do you see yourself 10, 15 years? Do you want to be teaching? Do you want to be researching? Combination?
Yeah, that's kind of the fork in the road I find myself at, honestly. Before getting this postdoc, because I was not looking for a postdoc when I was leaving UAB, I was actually looking for faculty teaching positions, because I started as a teacher and I love teaching. But this opportunity was kind of the perfect situation when it came for research for me. The type of research I wanted to do, the place I wanted to do it at. These 2 years, the idea is that I'm going to be spending, all of my time doing research and not having to split it between research and teaching, because I've done 100% teaching. I've done teaching and research. And so now I'm doing research alone. So I have no teaching responsibilities while I'm here. So I don't know yet. I would also really love to work at a university that has a master's program for chemistry. And the reason I would like to do that is because I think that master's programs are a really more accessible way to get more people, more diverse people involved in chemistry research. And I think that, microplastics are a great way to incorporate other disciplines with chemistry, like environmental science. And so, I don't think I would want to have a group that has PhD students, but I would love to have a group, if I did go to a university that had master's students, and help them, develop their, master's projects. It would be around some form of microplastics quantification, most likely, because that's kind of what I'm learning here.
That's Dr. Josh Forakis. In 2023, he earned a certificate in the Center for the Integration of Research, Training, and Learning from the Graduate School, and was awarded his PhD in chemistry from the College of Arts and Sciences. Today, he's doing his postdoctoral research in Hawaii. As an inquisitive person, one that embraces research just like UAB, he has a fantastic idea what it means to be a blazer.
So one thing I will say that has been really cool, the graduate students in the chemistry department at UAB, we actually, in one of my last years while we were there, we formed a committee. We made these T-shirts that have the Vulcan statue on the back holding an Erlenmeyer flask. And, that's my favorite shirt to wear out. And it says Chemistry Graduate Program, University of Alabama at Birmingham on the front. Just wearing that shirt, I've had more people just come up and talk to me, and for various reasons, what is on your back? Oh, you were a chemistry student. I loved chemistry, and we would just have a conversation. So I think that for me, it's been all of the connections I've made since I've been at UAB. I've made, personal connections that I value very deeply. But at the same time, I've also made a ton of professional connections that have really been helpful to get into this, place and kind of find my niche in this group and in, research. So everyone I've met at UAB, they, we meet up again at ACS conferences and other things like that. So it's almost like I've kind of held on to a family almost after leaving UAB. So that's, to me, I think that's a huge part of being a blazer.
Be sure to check out past episodes of the UAB Green and Told podcast. Listen in at alumni.uab.edu/greenandtold. Have a story to share or know someone who does? Email greenandtold@uab.edu. Finally, be sure to follow us on social media. Just search UAB Alumni on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for listening, and until next time, go Blazers.